Hi guys, it is Friday, May 1st. We are in the home stretch. That's right, we've made it to May. And we just had 3 long days reviewing time period 5, but there was a lot in there. So I hope that you felt that that was a good use of your time, and I look forward to having a chance to connect with you guys live on our Google Meet in I guess that's about 2 weeks away now. So we're back to our last lesson on the last topic that we developed with some continuity, which was post-war America 1946 to 1960. And on Monday of this week, we introduced the concept through the assassination of Medgar Evers and Bob Dylan's song Only a Pawn in Their Game. And you guys did a really nice job writing about that. Today, we look at the civil rights movement in its very early days after the Second World War. And I know this is a little heavy today, guys, but we just spent 3 class days on review. You're not writing about this. We lost a day because of the student council elections, and this is too important. So I feel good that this is all, the juice is worth the squeeze on this, guys. And when you come back on Monday, all that we're doing is sort of like a cumulative writing assignment. It's still short. It's still only 250 words. That's the one that I talked to you about before, about why did the Century label this time period, 1946 to 1960, Happy Daze, D-A-Z-E. So what's going on with civil rights at this time? And even though I've got to try to cram a lot of stuff into just today, as you can see, there's 6 pages of notes. I don't have to spend time with contextualization. Like, you understand how the new birth of freedom that was supposed to come out of the Civil War and Reconstruction with the Civil Rights Acts, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, and how all of that disappeared. And so I gave you a quick review of that, as well as the violence of lynching and the lack of economic opportunity through sharecropping. Then a quick review of Only a Pawn in Their Game, which showed the obstacles that the civil rights movement is facing during this time. And Dylan wrote about how Southern politicians were able to manipulate, to cater to build up and then manipulate that racist sentiment amongst so many poor whites that, look, your average Southerner did not have a very good life. It was very poor during this time period. But Southern politicians really played up of, hey, vote for me because I'm going to be the one that protects your white privilege. I'm going to protect it from that invading federal government that wants to take away the benefits of your whiteness and challenge the way that we live. And because of that, you see a lot of state action. And all of these examples that we look at, there's state action, whether it's Governor Ross Barnett in Mississippi resisting James Meredith and integration and in effect inciting, and he's arrested for inciting a rebellion. Or it's the state action like you saw in the Medgar Evers story, where it's an all-white jury, and twice an all-white jury is hung and cannot convict Byron De La Beckwith despite the overwhelming amount of evidence. So it's a system in which politicians actively campaign on the idea that, forget every other issue, a vote for me is a vote to protect the way we do things down here. And the federal government's not going to tell us what to do. And I'll stand up for that as that becomes the leading political issue. We'll see. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We're going to see example after example of that. All right. So we start with a couple of early achievements. President Truman, and how he is very cognizant of how the 1 million returning World War II veterans are treated as second-class citizens. So he desegregates the federal government and he desegregates the United States military. The Korean War is the first war that we fight as an integrated army. And there's massive blowback. The Southern faction of his party leaves. They formed the Dixiecrats, and gave you a couple of optional resources. Really recommend click on that video. It's an amazing story about the 1948 election and how it's a miracle that Truman won, and how the Southern faction of his party split over Truman's support of civil rights as he proposed a Civil Rights Act to Congress. Then there's a clip on Jackie Robinson, and we miss all of this stuff. I told you how we used to always have Jackie Robinson come into the school. It was the best assembly that we had. The actor Greg Kinney would come in and play him in person. And then because of that, we would spend the last kind of 2.5 days of class after everything else watching the movie 42, because basically it was 96, 97% of the story Greg Kinney would tell you when he came in to see the whole school in person. Look, this is a moment where sports matters because baseball mattered back then. Baseball doesn't matter today. NASCAR's way more popular than it. The NFL is more popular than it. Probably the NBA is more popular than it. But back then, baseball did matter. Baseball really was the national pastime. And baseball had an example of de facto segregation. The 16 owners had an unspoken rule that nobody would hire a black baseball player. And while Jackie Robinson integrates that, and that's a really big deal in 1947, I gave a short clip from Ken Burns Baseball. I tried to get the Ken Burns Baseball clip on Jackie Robinson as an additional resource, but it's all blocked, copyright. But there's a short clip on Curt Flood who talks about playing in the minor leagues in 1957. And just to show Jackie Robinson integrating baseball in 1947 didn't fix everything. And I think that's pretty powerful. There's a real short clip on the most infamous murder of the civil rights movement, Emmett Till. And while Emmett Till was not an activist, his murder for whistling at a white woman, and then the murderer is walking off scot-free despite somebody standing up in court and pointing a finger and saying that's who did it. It is a real catalyst for the movement. There's a short clip on Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott and the rise of Martin Luther King. And there again, we see the resistance. There's individual resistance. The Klan terrorist organization bombs Martin Luther King's home. He's not home at the time. But then you also see state action where until there's a federal court order, the buses won't be integrated, and the state arrests black carpool drivers for driving taxis without a license. When we look at early integration, you have to look in the realm of education. That is the first real successful case that the NAACP wins with Brown versus Board of Education. And there's some really cool stuff in there showing the Dahl test, right? To show, forget about the idea of the black school being inferior to the white school. It's Dr. Kenneth Clark's Dahl test that shows, look, when you segregate kids because of their race, they grow up with a different perception of themselves, and that perception is inferior. And the Dahl test shows how that manifests itself. So that's some pretty cool stuff in there. And then the backlash, the Southern Manifesto. Unfortunately, Strom Thurmond rears his ugly head again. This time he's not running for president as the Dixiecrats nominee, but now he is leading the Southern Manifesto, which of course all of this is under the auspices of 10th Amendment states' rights, that this is an activist court, that how dare they, interfere with education. That's something that's up to the states. And the states, here we are, they encourage all legal resistance to this. The first big showdown comes in Little Rock, where again, state action. Governor Orville Faubus has the National Guard out there surrounding Little Rock, but they do nothing to stop the mob of Little Rock residents who are prohibiting the 9 black students from entering the school. And it takes the interdiction of the federal government and the military occupation of the town of Little Rock. You get a couple of great quotes in both of these videos from, we thought she was cool when she was talking about Elvis, but we see the ultimate racist in Ann Thompson and how she talks about it wasn't right, but that's how it was. And then life would never be the same because 9 people. So you get some real good, that's what's great about The Century is this video was filmed in 1999, so they still had a lot of people that had lived through it. It's really amazing. Then finally, we look at the upper levels of education. We talked about how Medgar Evers played a major role in getting James Meredith into the University of Mississippi. You see the state resistance there. There's a great short speech on President Kennedy. You can listen to Bob Dylan's Oxford Town. And then finally, made famous in the movie Forrest Gump, Vivian Jones and James Hood integrating the University of South Carolina, and Governor Wallace standing in the schoolhouse door when Deputy Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach hands him a court order that says, you got to go. But Wallace made his point, and as we talk about Southern politicians campaigning, right, on protecting the Southern way of life from federal tyranny, you see Wallace's inaugural, his famous Segregation Forever speech. And then the speech, I didn't even put any notes. It's amazing. It's President Kennedy's speech about the integration of Alabama, University of Alabama. And it's kind of at the apex of great presidential speeches. So look, I know it's long, but like this is one of those really big things. And again, there's no writing today. You're not writing anything until Monday. So you really have until Monday to have all this stuff digested for our 250-word essay about why was 1946 to 1960 called Happy Days. So look, man, I know that was long-winded, but there are just certain things that we're not going to cut. We're not going to shortchange. It's too important to you being a good American citizen to understand what the civil rights movement had to overcome in its early days. And then we'll revisit it as you saw in the schedule that I gave you a little bit later on. All right? Have a great weekend, guys. I will see you on Monday.